Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You know, so we're just, they need like a microphone that's working because, I mean, if we ever made millions that they it's, oh, you is that you want to just have some hard, I saved you seat, Jeff. Well, I'm right.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Nice to see you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's technically afternoon now. I'm Lacy, the Planning Commission Executive Director. Thank you all for being here for our information barbecue. There are people currently watching us live. This is very weird. There's like a webcam thing showing my face at me, which is weird. Anyway, so be prepared for that, guys. But today's topic is the economics of place, and we're really thrilled to have two gentlemen here from VHB here to talk about this topic, and I'm going to quickly introduce them and then turn it over to them. So today we have Brent Lacy, who's a senior project manager in transportation planning. He leads the transportation for VHB in the Tampa office, and his practice is predominantly focused on multimodal transportation planning studies, complete streets, corridor studies, medical and university campus planning, growth management studies, corridor operations, and environmental assessments. I've gotten to know Brent through work together in APA, Florida. He's been a very active member in our legislative policy committee for many years, sharing his insights on DRIs and all sorts of squirrely questions like that we've had to tackle. So I appreciate Brent being here and introducing us to Ostrodka, who is out of their Orlando office, right? And come Simone. Come join us. Kurt is a professional planner specializing in urban and environmental planning. Some of his recent responsibilities have included sustainability planning, community visioning, public participation and facilitation, growth management policy and implementation, master planning for mixed-use communities. He's published articles on sustainability in the Florida Planning and the Florida Green Building magazine, and has served as an instructor for the USGBC Central Florida Chapter Lead Accredited Professional Exam Preparation Course. So join me in welcoming Brent and Kurt.
Well, let me first thank you, Melissa. It's good. I had lunch already, so I can check and make sure there's no mustard on my face when I go on the screen. It's good. And for those that listened to my work with Melissa on the legislative committee, you can't blame me for all the changes the legislature has made. Some of them fairly good, some of them not so good. But I do want to thank you for having us here. We're excited about being able to make this presentation. It's a big part of our practice now. VHB has actually been in business for well over 35 years. We have offices that do work in Florida for 25, but our office in Tampa is relatively new. So this is a great opportunity for us to do a little show and tell, let you guys know what we do, find out what your interests, where your focuses are here, and Melissa and the commission very kind to give us an opportunity to come in here. We've got 23 offices along the East Coast primarily. One that's part of the Southeast region that's actually out in Denver. We're not real sure how that is part of the Southeast, but it's attached to the offices here in Florida. We focus on planning and design, engineering, transportation work, environmental sciences, water resources, and a big part of our practice is where our focus today is in community planning, community design. Over the last probably 12 to 15 years, we, like a lot of other firms, have begun to incorporate elements into all of our transportation planning, all of our design work that's related to healthy communities. We recognize that it's not just moving the automobile from point A to point B, that the infrastructure, the bones, if you would, of the transportation system is a big part of healthy communities. The proper design and the opportunity to incorporate the elements for choice of mode is a big part of what we're incorporating really into everything that we do. Kurt's presentation today on economics of place is part of that. It has some research and some data and some findings I think you'll find pretty interesting. And with no more introduction than that, because we're starting just a little bit behind time and we want to get you guys out here if you need to at 1 or shortly thereafter. I'll have Kurt come up and begin his presentation is primarily his, but I'm here to answer questions from the transportation perspective if you have it. Kurt?
Right. Thank you, Brent. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, congratulations to Tampa Bay for beating my hometown Chicago Bears yesterday. And actually a thank you for hopefully putting the final nail in the Jay Cutler coffin. So what we are here to talk about today is the economics of place and how we need to look at how private investments and public investments can work together. A lot of times the public sector will put in the initial capital for great placemaking elements, and we have to have a reason to do that beyond it looks nice. So what we want to do is show the some of the financial reasons why local governments may choose to do that. But before we go there, I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about health community design, which is one of the most prominent planning studies that you've probably heard a lot about it at recent conferences. And one of the reasons why is because we've really built ourselves into a hole. Why don't Americans walk anymore? Well, it's no longer because they're lazy, because they can't, or people don't feel safe allowing their children to walk around. Because we still build neighborhoods, even in 2016, without sidewalks or bike trails. I've got a 6-year-old and a almost 4-year-old, and I'm not going to let them walk anywhere without a sidewalk. And it'll take some time to convince my wife to allow them to ride their bikes to school, which is less than a mile away. So we have not built our communities in really a way that encourages physical activity, and we need to find a way to change that. It used to be very common for people to ride bikes to school. How many here used to do that or walk or ride when they were younger? Okay, so most of us actually here. And the percentage of people that do that these days has gone down dramatically. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. There's a lot of social reasons. There's increased concern about security. But another fundamental reason is that we just have built our schools on the collector and arterial roadways, and there isn't a safe way for children to get there. And it's affected really all of our personal health. So this isn't any kind of political map or an electoral map, even though we use the same colors. What you see on the left side in 1991 is the obesity rates of the country, and it's all in blue, which signifies less than 20% of the population of those states was obese. Fast forward, 20 years here, and we're starting to see red, which is in the 30% of folks that are obese. And actually all of the blue under 20% has completely disappeared. Now these are statewide averages, and there's a lot of people who live in these states, but it does show a trend over time that our waistlines are continuing to grow. So what can we do about our personal health? Well, there's 3 different ways that it's affected. You've got your family and genetics. You can't do anything about that. You're born to who you're born with. There's the built environment, so that's again how we've designed our communities, how we've designed our roads, and there's behaviors and lifestyles. And we have a really hard time changing our behaviors and lifestyles. Anybody that's tried to go on a diet has found that unless they keep it up and really commit to that change, you tend to slide backwards. So what we as planners, architects, engineers can do, though, is try to create those attractive built environments that will encourage physical activity and walking. And maybe we can work some of those great placemaking elements in too that could have a great impact on our financial performance in our communities. Another reason to worry about this is we're spending an exorbitant amount of money on healthcare, $5.5 billion per year. There's a chart I've seen that shows that the United States spends the most on healthcare per capita out of any developed nation in the world, even though we do have access to great technology, to world-class doctors. And the problem is that the doctors are seeing people at the end of the pipeline when they already have these chronic issues due to the environment, rather than at the beginning where they can provide or prescribe some preventative maintenance, such as walking. So how can we reverse those trends? So I've started as a planner over 10 years ago, and I never thought I would be working side by side with doctors and people in the public health profession. But if you think about it, urban planning itself started as a response to public health concerns. That's why we have zoning, to keep those uses separated from, industrial uses separated from housing, to make sure that the public health is protected. So people are starting to come around and see that transportation and the ability for people to walk or bicycle is having a great impact on our public health. We've actually started a relationship with Dr. Richard Jackson. He is a doctor from UCLA. He spent some time at the CDC in Atlanta for a while, and he will tell you that when he sees somebody and they've got chronic health issues, whether it's obesity, diabetes, hypertension, that it's almost already too late by the time he sees them and would be able to prescribe whatever medicines he needs. What he wants to do is be able to say, if you could go back and introduce exercise and physical activity as a part of your everyday lifestyle, wouldn't that be a better way to address some of the issues you have, rather than me prescribing a bunch of pills for you to swallow every day? So what we as planning professionals, and particularly at VHB, have been looking at over the last 3 years is what are the benefits of creating a healthy community? Well, there's improved air and water quality because people may not have to drive as much, so that reduces the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that go into the atmosphere. Better mental health. There's a lot of studies that show when hospitals incorporate green space within their designs, the patients recover faster and are able to get out sooner. And probably one of the most important things that we'll learn about is reducing the risk of traffic-related injuries. Again, if you're able to design facilities that incorporate all modes in a safe way, that that can reduce the number of people that run across traffic because they don't have a safe place to cross. So we have looked at this from a number of different angles. We believe strongly that land use, transportation, health, and economics are all related. And so what I want to focus on today, and probably the reason why you came, is the economics of this placemaking. Because we think that to have a healthy economy, you have to have an economically strong economy as well. So what we'll do is I'll show several case studies of local governments where they have taken some of their roadways that people found that they didn't like as much and came up with ways to repurpose them. Maybe it was a road diet, maybe it was putting on-street parking. And then we've done research on the amount of tax revenue that's created, the number of new businesses that have moved onto the sites, and what the impact has been on the communities, whether or not they've been able to attract new private investment. And before I go on, we try to plan things for a purpose, but sometimes things happen unexpectedly. This was an unintended consequence of everybody playing the Pokemon Go app. Now this probably isn't sustainable. People aren't going to continue to play this over the years. That would be required to add 2.83 million years to their lives. So that's just a straight line projection, assuming that it remains a fad. It's probably not going to, and that's why, again, as community planners and engineers, we need to build the environments that will encourage people to go out and continue to get that exercise. So the first example I'm going to look at is Edgewater Drive in Orlando. Has anybody been there or heard about this one before? Okay, Tony, you. So this was a 4-lane roadway in Orlando. Had really a blighted character that people did not appreciate. But the city was going to resurface it anyway. And what they did is they took it down from 4 lanes down to 3 lanes with bike lanes. You can see it already has on-street parking, but really because of the characteristics of the road, it had wide 12-foot lanes. It encouraged speeding, and it wasn't a place where cyclists would like to go. So this is a before and after where they added a center turn lane and on-street bike lanes as well with the on-street parking. And this is a very simple, quick fix. All they had to do was restripe it. Which they were going to do anyway as part of a maintenance contract. So they didn't have to move the curbs, they didn't have to affect any utilities or stormwater on the outside edges. So the outcomes of doing this very simple fix was a reduction in speeding, a reduction in crashes, so it's become a more safe area. Pedestrian volumes have gone up, which in turn helped the businesses because people felt safe to walk and go from business to business. It also increased the bicycle volumes. And you may have read some of the studies that a person on foot or cycling spends more money per trip than a car that just drives by every day. So the mayor of Orlando, Mayor Buddy Dyer, actually uses Edgewater Drive as part of his annual bike to work with the mayor day every year. So that's kind of proof that this is a safer place for people to go. Some of the other impacts that had is that traffic initially decreased because people weren't sure about the new pattern, but then it rose back up to its normal level. So it didn't have any impact on traffic being diverted into other parts of the neighborhood. And really, 4-lane roads aren't that efficient anyway because a lot of people will make that left turn and back up traffic in the left-bound lane. So having 2 travel lanes and a center turn lane actually moves just about as many cars as efficiently as that other type of, as a 4-lane road. So in terms of the economic impacts of this, the city was very pleased to learn that just by adding a little bit of extra money, $50,000 to do this study, 560 new jobs were created, 77 new businesses opened in this time. And probably most importantly was the property value increase. So 80% increase in property value along the corridor itself and 70% within a half a mile. And of course, that is good for the local government because that is tax revenue that they are able to use to continue to provide the same services without raising other people's taxes. We talked about the improvements in safety, and again, there was an increase in bicycle and pedestrian activity because of the change. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is Clematis Street. I know that the APA conference was there a couple years ago, so many of you may have had the chance to go there. Again, this was another project that was a road diet. It had been a one-way street that had been converted to two-way with on-street parking. Many local governments used to put in one-way pairs because it is a very efficient way to move traffic just from a pure number standpoint. But one-way pairs aren't as good for businesses because then you only see half of the traffic once a day. So this was a conversion of one-way pairs back into a two-way street and with the addition of on-street parking. Again, they didn't move the curbs, they didn't move the utilities underneath or the stormwater condition. So the city of West Palm Beach spent $1.8 million on the redesign and redevelopment of this. So they put in all the streetscape improvements you could think about, whether it was new pavers, it was street furniture, it was landscaping along the way. And that investment by the local government of $1.8 million in turn turned into a $500 million investment from the private markets, because it was a more attractive place. People wanted to do business there. They saw the pedestrian activity on the street and determined this would be a good place to be competitive for business. Property values, according to CoStar, rose from $20 per square foot to over $100 per square foot. So that's real money. And it also gets 80,000 visitors per week, and it was named as one of APA, I can't remember if APA Florida or APA National's Great Places. National, so that's a big deal. Okay, the third example I want to talk about is Gain Street in Tallahassee. How many Seminole fans here? Okay, quite a few. Anybody take this road to get to the stadium? Okay. So this is another kind of blighted industrial corridor. Was previously 4 lanes, and along a bunch of existing industrial and brownfield sites. So not a place you might choose to walk unless you were going to a game. It didn't have sidewalks or bicycle lanes. It was kind of just the Wild West in terms of the existing roadway that was designed just for the car. So the city invested $35 million using a 1 cent sales tax. Again, paying for it by determining to tax themselves for this project and to transform it into a more attractive place. You can see they've added improved bus amenities here. You can see they've added a median with mid-block pedestrian crossings there, so that provides an opportunity for people to pause if they can't cross the street all at once and they're not at a traffic light. And then they've also put in some public art. I'm not sure if that's a top or a spear in the median there, but it's supposed to be a very efficient traffic circle that people were a little wary about at first, but then they understood how to navigate through there. So that $35 million turned into a 242 private investment. So you can see we're spending real money in terms of what the local government puts in first, but it has sometimes a 5 to 10 times increase in what the private markets will invest. So here's a couple examples of the projects that were put in. They're primarily student oriented. One spent $120 million in putting in new student housing. Another put in $25 million and cumulatively created over 1,000 construction jobs, which are temporary jobs, but they do help the economy. So again, another example of how the local government decided to have a vision to improve their roadway and invested some money in the public realm, in the streetscape, and that led to the private development markets being interested in investing within there. Let's see. The last example from a roadway perspective I want to share is from out of Florida. This is in California, in the city of Lancaster, and this is kind of one of those moonshot projects. You don't know how feasible it could be anywhere, but you want to know what the big plans are, so you can apply creative solutions to all of your projects. So this was a 5-lane road where motorists were regularly traveling over 50 miles an hour, even though it's signed for 35. And the reason for that, of course, is that roads are built for a design speed, and because there's no, there's wide lanes, there's no sense of enclosure on the side of you, and there's capacity, so that means not all the lanes are filled. It just kind of gives drivers the sense that they can speed, they can go a little faster. So it was a very dangerous place to be, particularly if you're on foot. And what this city did is they invested $11.6 million to reduce their roadway, or the lanes. They held the curbs again, so that's not as big of a reconstruction project, but they put in a large center median, which is then used for art space, for festival space, for their farmers market, any kind of public gathering. And they were able to do this because they did have a good network around them, so some of the traffic can move to other parts of the city without really impacting the other roads. It's just partially diverted. But they were able to create this new public gathering space in the middle of one of their suburban corridors. So this has led to a $400 million economic impact for the city. And again, we had a $11.6 million investment. So, quite the return on investment that they were able to leverage from that event. And, you can see here, they've closed the street down for events, so they don't have cars going through it all the time. Again, they were blessed to have a gridded network. But again, by having that vision to do something different, they were able to have a great economic impact on their community. Any questions before we move on?
I just have one. I saw that on that one, the speeds were reduced. Do you know, on like Clematis Street or Gage Street in Tallahassee, did they reduce the speeds as well?
I will have to look that up. I don't believe that they did because they were posted for 25 or 35. Sorry?
I think they, you mean for what they were originally?
Mhm.
I think they did.
Okay.
That was flying through there,
Mhm.
not anymore.
Something that's really important and pretty consistent with almost all of the road diet projects that we've been involved with or that we've done research for, even though it is normal to see the posted speed reduce, what you find is that travel through the corridor, even with traffic actually following the speed limit, the amount of delay through the corridor is really pretty minimal. I mean, the Edgewater example is 1.5 miles long, and the increased travel time during the peak period. And it's not, everyone would admit it's a little more congested as you go through the intersections, but it's less than 90 seconds. So for 1.5 miles, you've gotten all the benefits with only a 90-second increase in travel time, and that's during the peak period. During the off-peak, there is no difference in travel time. So it's very, very little impact, except for positive impact in terms of the transportation modes in that corridor. And you see that to be a pretty familiar story with most of the road diet or modifications, even if you don't even explain the diet.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So now I want to touch on trails. I picked two from Central Florida that we're familiar with. One is is part of the Orange County Trail, which is the Katy Way Trail, which goes close to our home. And it has it's able to support 516 jobs along the way, with about $42 million in annual revenue from those cyclists traveling by. Probably a little bit better known is the West Orange Trail. This goes through downtown Winter Garden, which is just west of Orlando. And the businesses that were surveyed along there, they attribute about 25% of the revenue of $5 million to people that come and ride the trails and stop for an ice cream. We're involved in part of the Coast Trail, which is a DOT project in preliminary design right now. And from what we understand, the communities are lobbying the DOT to bring the trail through their community because they know that it will have a impact on the number of people that come through the downtowns, and it provides some revenue for the businesses. But I wanted to take a look at two kind of moonshot trail projects, both in the state of Indiana. The first one is called the Monon Trail in Indianapolis. This was a $7 million project for its first segment, and it was a Rails to Trails project. So they used some existing rail right-of-way to do it, so they didn't have to acquire any new property. And they saw that this had a overall impact of a $140 million property value increase along the trail. Again, this was businesses, residential communities wanting to move next to the trail because it provided a competitive advantage for either their customers or their sales in terms of the people who would want to live by this trail. So following the success of that, and they did say that it was the equivalent of beachfront property within Indianapolis, which is more or less landlocked except for Lake Michigan. Following the success of the Monon Trail, they created a connection to that called the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. And this was a much more aggressive project. This did require a lot of easements and right-of-way to be acquired by the city. But they knew that the Monon Trail was such a success that they wanted to see what else they could put together. So this was an 8-mile trail to connect all the cultural assets within the city. And like I said, a much higher price tag, $63 million to design and rebuild this. And a lot of that was from the acquisition of property, because trails aren't that expensive in themselves. It's a 12, 16-foot pathway system with shades, street furniture, pavers along the way. So in their case, it was the choice of route that drove the price. But they estimate that has created 11,000, or supports 11,000 jobs along the trail, $800 million in economic impact. So again, a high leverage ratio in terms of what they initially spent to what the private investment that came back was. And the property values increased 148% within one block of the trail. So much greater than what we saw in Edgewater in Orlando, where we saw about 80% increase within immediately adjacent to the corridor. In this downtown environment, they saw 148% increase in property values. So with that, I would love to answer any questions. I thought we'd have more during this, so I tried to keep it a little shorter. Yes, Tony.
Obviously, the presentation talks about the investment that was made and the corresponding economic benefit. But I guess talk a little bit more about the connection between transportation planning and working with economic development departments, because somehow you've got to attract the developers to these corridors where you're making investments, or else put in a lot of infrastructure for naught. So what's that next phase that makes it that successful economic development corridor instead of just where we put it?
So great question. I think it's about creating those partnerships at the very beginning. So it's not simply the roadway engineers who primarily are concerned with moving vehicles and looking at volume over capacity ratios as the primary driver for creating a new road. It's working with community planners who have a kind of overall vision of how the transportation and the land use components can work together. And if we bring economics and health as part of the considerations, then we are looking at a much broader picture. So it's more than just the roadway and what's within the right-of-way, but it's everything that the right-of-way touches. So that's your interface between your public and your private realms. And by having the economic data to back you up, that allows you as, say, the project manager to be able to go to your county or your city commission and say, we would like to put in these upgrades, these more pedestrian-friendly streetscape elements, because we believe there's an economic case for it. We believe that there will be a return on investment that is far greater than what we as the local government will spend. And here's some case studies of where that's successfully been done. So I think your question is that it starts at the very beginning of the roadway project visioning, not at the end after the roadway's been designed and they say we can't change it now.
And quite often, a lot of our work is either in association with or even in some cases for CRAs, and they have a vision plan and they have a funding mechanism to help with the initial input. But there are other pieces to the puzzle once the design is complete. And it very often includes assisting the agency or local government put together the ad, the bid, the solicitation, if you would, to various developers for certain types of development along the corridor that's part of the adopted land use plan, and helping them through the process of selection all the way to the beginning of the construction of the projects. But most often it's in a corridor that has potential, it's identified potential, but the community hasn't been able to attract because they don't offer the features of safety and security, pedestrian, bicycle, and parking becomes a big part in many cases because you're creating, absolute prime parking space along that corridor that used to be a travel lane. And those spaces truly are much to those businesses along the corridor.
Sam.
talking about return on investment and some of the percentages you had on property values and things like that, what kind of time frame are you talking about?
So it's generally a 5-year window, and it's adjusted for inflation. We do work with an economist who assists us with that. So it's typically that 5-year window.
One thing I'll add, the Edgewater project, I actually, for a few years, lived 5 houses off of Edgewater Drive in Orlando. And many of the businesses that were there were, at best, they were struggling. And from time to time, only the events that were held in that community that brought in a surge of customers a couple of times a year actually kept them from closing their doors. And within, not 5 years, the full economic return is probably related to 3 to 5 year schedule, but immediately after the completion of the construction, those businesses were doing better. They were on solid financial foundations. Some were expanding, and in some cases, you could look at it as a positive or negative. A less desirable type business was really no longer properly located, and they had changed to new, more community-oriented, retail type shops. There's a lot of restaurant and outdoor bistro, and it's helped create a sense of place. I mean, it is a gathering place, that corridor for the community of College Park in Orlando. So there is a immediate impact to the businesses that exist that is an economic return for them and for that community as well.
So I think you're hitting the nail on the head by approaching planning with respect to health and economic benefits, because I think that those two items are really going to, help the developers to understand how they come into play. But we're still being faced with a lot of site plans that do not prioritize other modes of transportation like walking and biking. So it's kind of like a comprehensive view, because if agencies have development standards that don't really require the same or those amenities to be built along with the communities, then they have, I feel the agencies have the responsibility to make sure that their development standards meet that. But on the flip side, the development standards are the bare bones minimum, okay? And obviously, developers are concerned about economic, impacts. So, but I guess the question, how can we as transportation professionals help bridge that gap and help the developers understand the overwhelming benefits that they will see a return from by incorporating not just the bare bone minimum, but go above and beyond the minimum, go above and beyond the design standards.
Well, obviously, showing case studies and examples, as many as we can find, and frankly, we're looking for examples right now for 6-lane roadways being road divided into 4. They're harder to find. There are those projects that have been completed, but the economic and the revenue analysis is not long enough term to prove it. But the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, and being able to show them case examples of the differences that you can almost find examples, and one of the most we've been knocking around and trying to figure out how to do is a similar project with no transportation, multimodal improvement being built, and its value after 5 years versus one in that general community or area of the state, whether it's Florida or elsewhere, and the differences in the improvements. But one thing that I do want to focus on, as transportation professionals, is a quote from you right now, we can't do it alone. It's everyone else has to be involved in this, I would call it renaissance of our corridors of commerce is what it amounts to. From our elected officials, the folks in the planning department that are writing policy, land development regulations, it all has to come together, because you're right, in a lot of cases, not all cases, and I think we've got a developer here in Tampa that's doing an awful lot for downtown toward the right type of thing. That example will be terrific on a national basis, and it's as successful as we expect it will be, because it will show that additional investment is well worth in terms of return. We're doing the Naples mobility and connectivity everybody thinks of Naples as a very affluent community. They have many people down there with a lot of spendable cash, and there's some resistance even there in terms of converting some of the facilities to these type of corridors from where they're at, because they're so auto-centric. But when you look at the numbers and you explain to these are citizens and not developers, they're starting to come around and say, this makes an awful lot of sense. We can have a more vibrant, a safer community. It is an extremely high accident corridor on 41 and the other major arterial down there. They're interested in alternate modes. They want to be able to walk. They want to be able to get on their bicycles rather than their cars. So it will be an example in fairly short term in Florida of a community that is not a blighted area by any means, that has major arterials that are absolutely auto-centric. I mean, we've got 6 lanes of travel with a median and a 5-foot sidewalk on the back of it. And that's what they're dealing with on US 41. We're not sure what the final recommendations will be there, but it will be for something different than that. But hopefully, and because we're working with the Department of Transportation, which is a big part of this, a lot of these are state roads. The state tends, in the past, has been resistant with their new complete street guidelines and everything coming forward and being incorporated. Everything's getting easier. But they have a project in the work program for major reconstruction for a large segment of US 41. So working together with them, using funding that's already in place and implementing these kinds of changes, we can minimize the costs to local government, municipal government, probably not increase the overall cost, significantly percentage-wise, and effectuate a change for what is going to, again, be a 1.5 to 2 miles of urban arterial that is all about moving cars right now and not really about moving people.
So go back to your question though, in terms of what resources as a transportation planner are available. FHWA and the Volpe Center have published 2 white papers that talk about the kind of relationship between the built environment and the transportation systems and community health. What they do is they've recognized a number of MPOs throughout the country and a number of state DOTs. Florida is not one of them yet. They looked at North Carolina, Iowa, Massachusetts, and 2 others. But within the FDOT, FDP, Florida Future Development Plan, there are about 6 different policies and goals that talk about community health, active transportation, complete streets, but there is a great emphasis on health. But since it's a big, kind of slow-moving ship to turn, the guidance is there. It's just in terms of the implementing policies, if they've been created yet. We're working on a project for DOT in Umatilla, which is in Lake County, State Road 19, and that is the DOT's first corridor study to incorporate healthy community design. So we're still kind of pioneering this. It's kind of exciting and a little scary at times, but it's moving forward, and we hope that that there'll be a lot of great other case studies to pull from.
If somebody was trying to replicate this type of case studies, how do you go about getting that kind of data, both for the corridor and the development? I can see some of it being from the property appraisal, like the revenue and that sort of thing. Where did you find that?
Some of that is from business interviews. So it's some surveys. A lot of it comes from the property appraiser. And sometimes cities will get the information directly from them because they knew they were going to create a new type of project, and they wanted to have that baseline data so they can measure from something down the road. So the easiest way to find it, of course, is to call the city and hopefully, or county, and hope that they have it. But if not, we'll research using a variety of sources like CoStar or some of our ESRI data to find out what the property increases have been.
The sales tax information for every business is available. It's obtainable, and you can get those returns for the sales and the tax that they pay. You can't find out what their actual income was. It's more closely held, but the actual sales tax paid from one year to another is available through the state.
is community redevelopment areas have to do an annual report, and oftentimes they will want to brag about the projects that they created to, describe what the impacts were, so that's another good source. If you know that a CRA had a project that was implemented for a streetscape or something like that. So, any other questions? Okay. All right, well, thank you so much. We appreciate that.
If everybody didn't sign in, please sign in at the doorway. We'll resume our Info Barbecue series in 2017. We have some exciting partnership things coming in with the Tampa Innovation Alliance, and maybe we'll have a special walkthrough lunch in historic Ybor and some other things coming up. If you have ideas for upcoming sessions, please let us know. Thank you.